Hi, I'm Duncan Moss, and I live in Chessington in Surrey, in England, in Europe. And I'm a massive fan of the old Universal horror films and the Aurora kits, many of which were based on these Universal films, which were made, I think, from 1923, Hunchback of Notre Dame with Lon Chaney, to 1945, I think, The House of Dracula. And what happened was that they were shown on American television in the late 1950s, where they were phenomenally successful again, and there were a lot of a very young audience was attracted to them, from boys ranging from about 7 upwards, and they were sensibly put on the TV on a Friday night so the parents could see them, and then decide they were okay, and then they were repeated on a Saturday night. Of course, we get nothing like that in the UK. And the first kit, I think, that came out was in 1962, and it's the Frankenstein monster, which I've got here. What basically happened, that was before I was born, and my friend Dominic Masters, who's a little younger than me. But there was I lived in Hinchley Wood next door to him at the time, in about the 1970s, and there was a little shop in Long Ditton that was selling these kits, and Dominic was buying them, and I started to follow suit, and soon we had a very large collection. Of course, we hadn't seen any of the films as yet because they hadn't been shown around our age group. But we did have several horror movie books, including the Dennis Gifford Pictorial History of Horror. So we'd seen all these wonderful stills from these movies, and they were capturing our imagination. And these kits did exactly the same thing. As I say, this Frankenstein monster is based on the Boris Karloff creation, and of course it's the film Frankenstein that brought Boris Karloff to stardom after being a small part player for over 20 years. Over here we've got The Mummy, which also Boris Karloff played. I think very soon after playing the Frankenstein monster. And the great thing is that a lot of people played the Mummy after Karloff with bandages all around them. So it could have been anybody. I mean, it could have been President Roosevelt. But it couldn't have been him because he was in a wheelchair. But what happened with Karloff was that he takes the bandages off very soon after he comes to life. And you see he's had such a wonderful face. He looked like a pickled walnut. His face was 3,000 years old, and they were able to make his face look ancient and wrinkled by using beauty clay. So that's rather ironic. Over here we've got the Forgotten Prisoner of Castlemaine. This is one of the few kits in the range that weren't based on a film character. There was also a witch one. I haven't got that, but they were basically just somebody at Aurora just used their imagination, came up with a wonderful kit, and of course these have glowing parts to them, but the original kits didn't have glowing parts. These were in the 1970s when Dom and I were buying them. You had a choice of some parts. You had in two ways. One set were just like the rest of the kit, but then the other bits were glowing, and of course I loved anything that glowed, so I went ahead and put the glowing parts on. This is the creature from the Black Lagoon. He actually came later on in the 1950s, but he was Universal, so they've lumped him together with the horror characters. He's more a science fiction character. But he was a wonderful character. The creature from the Black Lagoon, then there was the Revenge of the Creature, and then the Creature Walks Among Us. That was a very, very interesting film, way ahead of its time, that dealt with the rights and wrongs of vivisection. Um, that it was he was a very fine, good character, and again a very fine kit. Just to show you, this is the Phantom of the Opera. This kit has a tremendous affection for this model, because it was given to me by Dominic's older brother, a very dear friend of mine, Giles Masters, for my 13th birthday in 1976. And it's got a real relevance to it. It's the Lon Chaney Phantom of the Opera. But Adam Giles and Dom Masters, their mother, was the actress Heather Sears, who was in the 1962 Hammer version with Herbert Lom. So that kit really means a lot to me. Just show you, this is Dracula, based on the Bela Lugosi characterization for Universal. And what's so lovely about these models, it's not just a great figure, but the incredible imagination around the kit. There's he's got there's a tree with bats. There's the stands have got a lot of imagination put into them, and just no wonder they sold by the bucket load, because they really have been beautifully executed. This is the Wolfman, as played by Lon Chaney Jr. In 4 films. He brought tremendous pathos to a very nice guy who got bitten by Bela Lugosi and turned into a werewolf. But he was a really good guy, and he spends a lot of the films trying to find a cure for his lycanthropy. I won't tell you whether he's successful or not, but a fabulous model kit made with tremendous imagination. And we just got one more, last but by no means least. This is the fabulous King Kong. All these kits are now 40 years old, but still got tremendous affection for them. I haven't got all of the kits in the range. There was also Godzilla. I was planning to get her, but I never quite got round to it. But King Kong wasn't, of course, a Universal character until quite recently. I think he's now under the Universal thing, but he was RKO, but they obviously they're able to negotiate and get him. They also did a very fine Dr. Jekyll, which this isn't the Aurora version, but this was I think it was the Mobius reissue. What happened was that, very sadly, Aurora went under in the early 80s, and then some of the another companies got the kits reissued, and this is the same kit, but I think it's got some slightly superior tooling. And of course, he was MGM. This is Frederick March. So obviously there was a little bit of negotiation with other film companies, and then Mobius went triumphant, because Universal did a franchise for The Invisible Man, but they never did a kit of The Invisible Man, who's played by Claude Rains. So Mobius thought they would do one on their own bat. And I've got both these kits. I haven't had a chance to make them, but I can't wait to have some time to make them. So there we really have it. Just trying to find a way of try and keep it on there. The films were shown over in the UK in 1977. I was knocked out I saw most of them. I was knocked out by them, and it inspired me to make my film The Zombie Cometh, which had Adam Giles and Dominic involved, and also had Heather their mum, and Tony, production designer, Tony Masters, their dad, was also on hand to give me some advice. And there's still a massive interest in the kits. Some of these you can still get, but some companies have them. There is a marvellous book by Thomas Graham, which is about the history of the Universal kits. He's just updated it quite recently. There's also a couple of very good DVD about the history of the Universal kit, which I think you can get in America from I think it's a website called Witch's Dungeon. I'm not sure whether it plays. I think you have to have a multi-region player to play it. I think it only plays on American machines under normal circumstances, but they'll advise you about that. There's also Classic Monster website, which does some fantastic does some absolutely fantastic magazines about horror. It also doesn't just do Universal. It also does British horror as well. And in fact, there's a lot of other great magazines on the market. There's talk about a lot of Universal films being remade. There was an attempt in the 1980s. Nigel Neal of the Quatermass Experiment had written a fantastic script for the Creature from the Black Lagoon, where he has a mate, and Jack Arnold, who directed the first two films in the 50s, was going to direct, but I think health problems put paid to that. But Universal are planning to remake the films, and there's just been so much merchandise about these films coming out over the years: mugs, shaving foam, other figures. There's still a massive fascination, particularly in the States, with these movies. Although I think it needs to be made quite clear that a lot of the talent that went into these pictures was British. Boris Karloff was British, so was Basil Rathbone, so was Lionel Atwill. Director James Whale was. I think there was a couple of other British people as well heavily involved in these movies. So I hope it's been a privilege sharing these models with you. As I say, they are incredible films. I think that some of them are now 70, 80, getting on for 90 years old. They still they're so beautiful to look at. And of course, the horror stories, the horror classics, are very fine pieces of work. I've never understood, being a practicing Christian, why so many Christians are against these movies, these stories, because they're about people that don't fit in. They're about loneliness. They're about, the fact that the performances, because of the special effects, and they weren't brilliant, the special effects in these movies, but they didn't get in the way of human performances. And I just warmly invite you to have a look at them if you've never seen them. They are well worth watching. Well, I hope you've enjoyed my little display of Universal horror models, and well, thank you for putting up with me. Signing off right now. Thank you.